Hey, hi everyone. I am just getting ready to share my screen and we'll go over what you can really expect for the registry. Just want to make sure I can see the chat going on in case anyone has any questions. Okay, perfect. So the purpose of this live is really to just get you ready and know what to expect the day of the registry. This way, you're not nervous about the exam itself because there is a lot of information out there that can help. All right. So who am I? My name is Laura Nappy. I'm a radiation therapist. I have been since 2015. I can't believe it's been that long. Before I became a radiation therapist, I studied radiography and then mammography. So I've taken a total of 3 registries from the ARRT already. So I have a bit of experience with the format of the test. And on top of that, since becoming a radiation therapist, I have created multiple sources to help you as students study as well. And I'll get into them a bit more as we go. So first thing you want to look at is the ARRT content specifications. So this is an outline of what to expect on the exam. They update the content specifications every 3 years or so to make sure everything is up to date with practice standards and what we're actually doing in clinics. Now, there are some differences, so you just want to make sure you are up to date with the content specifications and looking at all of the material on there so you're best prepared. So the content specifications breaks down the registry into 3 different sections. So first is patient care. There's a total of 46 questions in this section. And they further break that down into patient interactions and management, which it has 29 questions. Patient and medical record management has 17 questions. So for every registry exam, regardless of which one you have, because I believe there are 3 different exams every time they create these exams. So every 2 to 3 years, they update it, and there's only 3 types of exams. So all of them have 46 patient care questions. Next is radiation safety. This is 51 questions. So it has more questions than patient care does. We have physics and rad bio, which has 21 questions. Protection, equipment, operations, and QA has 30 questions. Last is procedures. This is the bulk of the exam. Over half of the questions are in procedures, so that's 103 questions. And it's broken down into 4 different sections. We have treatment sites and tumors, which is 26. Treatment volume and localization has 18 questions. Treatment and dose calculations has 24 questions. And treatments has 35. Now, if you do look at the ARRT content specifications, they break down what is entailed in each of these sections. These are just the titles. Below that, they will have different subsections and a little bit more of a description, so you know exactly what they mean by physics and rad bio versus treatment sites and tumors. So before you even get to the exam, I want to talk about the process of this a little bit. The first and foremost is you need to complete an educational program that's recognized by the ARRT. And there is a link and a list of schools that are on this website. Then you need to apply for certification and registration with the ARRT themselves. So you can apply up to 3 months before you actually complete the program, but you can't take the test until after the program is complete. After you apply and they review your application, you'll get this candidate status report. Then once you get this report, then you can submit your application as well as a fee. And all of the exams occur at these Pearson View centers. So you have a year deadline to schedule your exam from the time that you submit your application. After that year passes, you'd have to just reapply. But there's a total of a 3-year window after you complete your program to take the registry. So you have 3 years total since you graduate, but the registration only lasts for 1 year. So you just have to reapply and resubmit that application. So you have 3 attempts to pass. If for some reason you don't pass, which hopefully we won't even get to this point, on your ARRT dashboard, there will be a reapply button on the website. So it doesn't specify exactly how long you have to wait until after your first attempt to reapply. I've heard from previous students, like there is a pretty quick turnaround, but they don't specify, so I can't tell you an exact time frame for that. Now, once we get to the exam itself, there are 3 sections of the exam. So like we said, this occurs at Pearson VUE centers, and you can take the exam at almost any of these centers. So if you don't like your test date that you scheduled, you want a different one and your location doesn't have it, you can look at a different location. But I would recommend reducing any stress. So if adding an additional commute is going to create more stress for you, maybe don't do that. It's up to you and what you would like to do. So before you get to the exam, you want to arrive at least 30 minutes before your appointment time. This makes sure that you're situated, you're not rushing around, you have enough time to do the check-in process, which includes going through your identification and scanning your palm. So for identification, they match the ID that you applied with. So make sure if you have a name change, you have the proper matching name for your ID. And you want 2 forms of ID for your application. You can't have anything in the exam room itself. There are lockers that you can use in the building. And if you have any pockets, they will check your pockets. Don't wear anything with a hood. You're not allowed to wear a hood, but they do say to wear layers just in case you feel cold. And there are multiple tests going on at the same time. So if you're anyone like me, like I get very distracted easily. I think there was somebody taking a test that they had to write an essay, and just hearing their keyboard click really distracted me, but they gave me headphones or earplugs to help muffle the noise so I can fully concentrate. So once you're ready to take the exam, you're sitting at your computer. This is broken down into 3 steps. The first step is kind of your introduction. So there's an intro to the exam itself, a tutorial that is optional. You don't have to do it, but I recommend it. It's not part of the time. And then an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. So it's just saying that you're not going to disclose the information that's on the test. So this is the first part. Once you're done with this, you have the full examination time. Now the exam is 230 minutes. And you have that much time to complete 230 questions. And in that 230 questions, they include both the actual test questions and the pilot questions. And we'll get to that next. This also includes any time to review questions. So you have time to answer the questions and then go back to any that you might need to review. After you're done, there's a survey. It has 13 questions about the testing experience. So the exam itself is computer-based. It's multiple choice for the most part. There are some that are a little bit different, and I will get to that later. So there are 200 scored questions. That means 200 out of the 230 questions count towards your grade. Pilot questions are questions that might be used in future exams, but they're kind of testing them out to make sure, or to see how people score on them, to see if they should use them. So we have a total of 230 questions, but you don't know which ones are scored and which ones are pilot questions. So answer all of them as if they are scored questions. Now the total test time is 230 minutes. So that means you have a 1 minute to question ratio. Some questions won't take you a full minute. They'll be much quicker because they're very straightforward. Some might take you the minute or longer. So something that I recommend as you're studying or taking practice exams, you want to time yourself. So if you're taking a test that has 200 questions, set your timer for 200 minutes. Or if it's less, 100 questions, set your timer for 100 minutes. This way, you're preparing yourself best with that extra stress of time. That's really important because a lot of students have a little bit of that nervous test taking anxiety because of that pressure that is included with the time. And you don't want to run out of time. So you want to make sure that you're practicing taking the test in an adequate amount of time. A scaled score of 75 or higher is passing. So if you get a 75, you pass. Now, the registry does what's called scaled scores. So different questions might be weighed differently depending on the level of difficulty. So pretty much what they say is if you get a 7.5 on one of the sections, that's considered like around a 75, give or take a little bit depending on the score. So if we eliminate the thought of scale scores, if you want to know how many questions you need to answer correctly, it's about 150 questions out of the 200. But again, it could be 151 or 152 or 148 to 149, depending on the scaled scores. And we don't really know how many or which scores are to which question, it doesn't tell you anywhere. So just practice yourself, making sure you get 75s or higher on your practice exams as well. So some of these images coming up are directly from the ARRT. So this is an example of what it looks like on the registry. This is like the top bar. You have a timer on top. It tells you how much time is left. Also tells you how many questions, what question you're on out of how many. So there would be 230. And you have these options for flagging the question, commenting, and your calculator. You can toggle back and forth between previous question and next question. So flagging your question is a great feature that a lot of people recommend. You want to flag the question if you're unsure of the answer, but be careful not to second guess yourself too much. Sometimes if you flag too many, then you go back and you're like, it might be A, but I think it might be B. Like you're just overthinking it at that point, and it's sometimes better to go with your gut. But if you're not sure and you don't want to take too much time, flag it, move on, and come back to it for later. I would recommend at least choosing your best answer so you don't have any incomplete questions. The comment section is really for the ARRT. So if you feel that a question is unfair or you have a suggestion, you can leave a comment. But again, you're being timed, so I wouldn't spend too much time on this comment section because it might take away from your test time. If you finish early and you have a thought, maybe then you can go back to that. So a question often is, what kind of calculator is on the registry? Can I bring my own calculator? So no, you can't bring your calculator. They will give you these electronic versions. When I took my test, they did give me a standard calculator, like a physical calculator, but both of these options are available on the computer screen. So if we go back up here, it says calculator, you would click on that and then these would pop up. And I think you have to toggle back and forth between standard and scientific. Scientific is more valuable, I guess, for the questions that we might need. It has the option for that caret symbol to put something to the power of, or inverse tangents, and parentheses. I use parentheses a lot to make sure that your calculator is calculating exactly what you want it to do. If you put in too many functions at one time, it will do it in the proper order, but sometimes we forget what the proper order is. So I would definitely use your parentheses as much as you can. So there are different question types. They are multiple choice, but there might be some more involvement of the multiple choice. You want to pay very close attention to the wording and the language that's used for the questions. I know you're probably studying a lot and taking a lot of practice exams. So a lot of times, sometimes what you do, or what I'm guilty of myself, is reading the first half of the question and thinking, oh yeah, I've seen a question like this before. I know exactly what they're asking me. But you want to make sure you read the whole thing through, make sure you understand what they are asking before assuming and answering the question out of maybe speed or lack of time, because then that could completely change the answer. Somebody did ask me about SI units for the registry. So on the ART content specs, it does say that SI units are the primary principle unit of radiation measurement that's used for the exam. This says primary, doesn't say only. What I would recommend is knowing how to convert between these units, knowing the SI units and how it relates to the traditional units. Instead of trying to memorize it all, sometimes knowing those conversions will help. So as far as the question types, we have multiple choice. In this case, we want to choose the best answer out of the options. Sometimes they give you really tricky ones where 2 might be great answers, or 2 could be answers, but one is better than the other. Multiple answers is when you would select multiple correct answers out of a list. So either maybe they would give you Roman numerals and you select 1 and 2, 2 and 3, something like that. Or maybe it's a multiple select as many as you think are correct. Illustrations would be like they would show you a picture, maybe of some sort of anatomy, or I'm not sure what else they would show, and they could label different parts of the image or graphic, and then you want to match the graphic to the answer. So say they showed a picture of the abdomen, and 1 was like the spleen, 2 was the liver, and then 3, et cetera, et cetera. You would choose the label to the appropriate answer for the question. The video would be watching a short video that they provide and then answering multiple choice questions based on this video. And then sorting answers. So this would be like a dragging and drop of a sequence or order. So something that comes to mind would be like the quality factors for different beams. Try to put them in order, or the order of the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross grief stages, something along those lines. Those are just examples. I don't know for sure. And then negative question types. So they would say, which of the following is not the answer or is not correct? A lot of times I've seen that not or except is capitalized to help point it out, but in case it's not, make sure you're looking for that. Now, these question types are for all ARRT tests. So it's not specific to radiation therapy. We could have all of these types, we can have 2 or just 1. So it's just good to know ahead of time what kind of questions they can ask. And if you're preparing the content, it shouldn't matter how they ask the question, because you know the material, you can answer in multiple ways. As far as the videos, can we rewatch the videos if needed? I didn't see anything saying not. I would assume that you can watch it as many times as you have the time for, and you can go back to the questions as needed. So I would think you can rewatch them. So once you're done, this window will pop up for exam review. These are all of your questions, and it will show you which ones are flagged. And then you can click on individual questions that you want to go back to. You can review all of the questions, review the incomplete questions, and review flagged. So one of the tactics I did, not saying it's the only way, but just what I did was I flagged the questions that I really wanted to go back to. I went through all of my flagged ones, felt a little bit more confident with those answers. And then if I had time, I went back and I reviewed as many as I could. So it really depends on the time you have. This is why I do recommend at least answering the questions in case you don't have time and don't have time to review it. But you do have the option. Once you're done, they will ask you, are you sure you're done? Like twice. So you just want to make sure you're confident, and you're never going to feel 100% confident until you see that score pop up. And that's okay. That's really normal. So here are some statistics. Pablo asked, are there any fill in the blank questions? No, there are no fill in the blank questions. So these are the statistics from last year. Every year they publish statistics, which is helpful for everybody to know what the last cohort did and how maybe it can help you. So this breaks down the different content categories based on the content specs that I mentioned in like the first few slides. If you look at the mean score, they say that you can say 8.7 is about 87%. So what I like to do is look at these lower scores that are closer to 75, because that is just at the passing score. You want to have much higher. So if the national average was lower for radiation physics and biology, or radiobiology, radiation protection, equipment operation, and quality assurance, and prescription dose calculation, for me, I would definitely recommend that those are areas that you study more. I wouldn't only focus on those areas. It just seems to me that those questions might be more challenging for the national average, that maybe you might feel that they're challenging as well. So studying those sections in greater detail might benefit you. I would recommend to study every section, just because these three are probably the hardest. Don't only focus on them, because it's important. I've seen students who score really well on the patient care, but maybe not as well on these sections. If they're attempting again, they didn't study the patient care, and those sections went a little bit lower. So it's really important to not forget about any section in particular. Some other tips for studying would be to make sure you get a good night's sleep before the exam. You don't want to cram anything or pull an all-nighter the night before, because it's a lot of information. As you can see, all of these sections are very jam-packed. It's nothing that you can learn overnight. I would recommend studying as much as you possibly can before you take the exam. If you feel you're not ready enough to do this, just consider pushing back your test date. It's not a big deal. You want to make sure you're feeling confident. Again, you're never going to feel fully confident, because it's just the nature of it. It's just anxiety and test anxiety and nervousness. So as long as you feel like you're ready enough, I would take it. And in the morning, you don't fully need to study as much as you think you do. I would definitely eat a good breakfast. And maybe what I did was I had a whole sheet of like the QA procedures and the like tolerance doses, just to refresh my mind, to make sure those memorization concepts stick. And these testing scores at the center that pop up when you're done are preliminary. So they say that that's not your official score. However, I haven't seen it really change much in my experience with students, but they do mail your official scores within 30 calendar days. You can check online to see if you populate in the registry, but that might take about 4 weeks to update. Could be sooner, but I would say at least expect that time. Just gonna look at any questions. So do we get any scrap paper when we go to the testing center? They do give you a whiteboard when you get there. The only thing is it's limited, so you can't erase it yourself. You have to raise your hand and have them come erase it for you. So that might be a time-sensitive thing. So I would be careful with how much you write down. I know some people like to go in there and write down all of the equations or specific things that you might want to remember or think you might forget right away. You could do that. But in case you like to work out any math problems, I would leave space for that as well. Let's see. Do you have to go through all the questions after you review a flag question, or can you just jump to submit? You can just jump to submit. You don't have to do any review at all. So that's completely up to you. If you feel like you don't want to second guess yourself at all, definitely you can just submit it. Ooh, Brian, good luck with the traffic. Definitely leave early. You want to make sure you're getting there at 7:30 if you're taking your exam at 8. Okay, so some review materials that I have personally created and wanted to just share. First and foremost is my comprehensive review guide for the exam. I created this when I was preparing for the test, I took a bunch of notes based on the ART content specifications. I wrote it all down, and then I did really well, and I took my exam. I got a 95, and my classmates really pushed me to do something with it to help other students, which is what I did. I updated it, so make sure you have the second edition because that is up to date with the newest content specs. They do change, so I did change the book, and then I've also updated it based on experience that I have learned through the years of being a radiation therapist. So I'm really proud of the second edition and how much better I think it is than the first. They're both great. I think the second one is better, but maybe I'm a little biased. And then the calculations manual. So this one I made specifically for the math and how I would break it down, like if I was talking to you in a tutoring session, and how to make it as simple as possible, because I feel like a lot of the physics books are pretty complex. And just to make sure we cover everything that could possibly be on the boards. It's really hard to say exactly what math questions are going to be on there. So I just made sure I covered them all, even if some students or some professors actually have said maybe, I think, is it Maynard F might not be on the exam. I'm not sure. So I put it in there just to make sure you cover it and can understand it. I also have my online review course and tutoring as well. So I have a team of tutors that can help make sure that you understand all the materials if you want one-on-one help. As far as the course, I want to see if I could share my screen just to give you a little bit of an overview of what it looks like in case you don't have it yet. So the course is broken down into sections like the ART content specifications. And the one thing that I did not do, but I had a licensed therapist do, was test anxiety tips. That's something I hear over and over from students, that they have test anxiety, which I'm sure a lot of us do. Like it's scary. I totally agree. So I had her, she has 3 videos in here, I believe there are 3, to help you reduce that test anxiety. And that starts from an earlier point before the night of the test. So I would definitely look into that first. And then each section just has different videos going over each section in great detail. And there are closed captionings to help you study while maybe if you're in an area where you can't play it, you don't want to hear my voice anymore, I get it. And you can use that. Each section has review questions as well. And I recently just added another test exam at the end. So if you go to the end, there are review exams. So now there are 4. There were 3, just added this 4th one. So if you're in there and you didn't see that yet, go ahead and check that out. I should have a 5th ready, hopefully by the weekend. And yeah, and then you have at least 600 questions to test your knowledge on there. So let me go back to my previous screen. And how similar are the questions at the end of your book to the boards? So my test questions, I think, are more straightforward because I want to make sure you get the concept. It's hard to say how the registry asks their questions. I hear they're challenging. I've had program directors tell me that they had somebody from the ART come and tell me that the questions are similar, and some students say that they're really challenging. So it's hard to gauge. My overall goal is to get you to understand the concept. Once you understand the concept, you should be able to answer most of the questions a little bit more easily. Let's see. Just some quick reviews on the course itself. There are tons on the website if you want to see. Something that I guess I'm really proud of is that students who have taken the exam multiple times, once they use the course, it helped increase their score. So I'm just really excited about that and to be able to help everybody. And also I'm constantly listening to what you guys are asking, what questions you're asking, so I can make videos to make it more understandable for you. So just a few study tips before we wrap up. Somebody asked, how far in advance would you recommend using the course or any studying in general? So This is really dependent on you. I'll tell you what I did, and then I did ask some other students what they did as well. When I was graduating, I finished my didactic classes in May. Then we had clinics all summer, and I graduated in September. So after my classes were done in May, I took like a week break of thinking, I guess you could say. And then I started studying for the registry after clinical hours or during my lunch break. It wasn't like many hours at a time because that to me was a lot. That was too much. So I would just do a few hours a night and just maybe a little bit on the weekend just to help me balance out, feeling sane with all of the studying to do. And that really helped me. I did that for the 3 months. So I wouldn't say it was very intense studying for 3 months. It was like light studying for 3 months. And then a few weeks prior to the exam, I really ramped it up to really make sure I was getting it. I actually had my test scheduled for the end of September, and I was tired of studying by the beginning. So I rescheduled my test to be the first day I could possibly take it. And that worked for me. That doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. Some people might feel more comfortable with less time. So it's really on what works best for you. A few of the students that I just recently asked how much they studied, a lot of them said the last 4 weeks before the exam, they really ramped up their studying really heavily. Some started a little earlier, but very slowly. So based on what my experience was, I do say at least the 3 months. The course is valid for a year and a half. I want you to have it during school so that you can reference it at different times and slowly get into it so you don't feel like you have to cram, because that I think is one of the challenging parts about studying, just time management and everything. So as much time as you can give yourself, and it really depends on your schedule as well, then we can go through that too. I do have some schedules in the course that can help you plan it out and what you need. I didn't have the SEAL exams when I was studying, not to age myself, but I didn't, but those were briefly after I graduated. And I have a pinned post in the Facebook group about test scores and what students felt like, if they felt like it was similar to their scores. And it's kind of mixed. A lot of students felt like the SEALs exams test scores they got were very similar to the registry scores that they got. Not specifically the same questions were the same, but they were testing similar. And other students have other opinions. So it's hard to fully say what the best method is. I think it really just depends on you. SEALs tests in general, let's say, they become outdated sometimes, or maybe there are incorrect answers. So regardless of the material you're using, I would recommend, making sure you're not just saying, okay, I got a 75, great. You're going back and saying which questions you got wrong and why you got them wrong. And what about the questions you got right? Did you guess on the question, or do you really fully understand that question? So it's not so much just taking the test questions, it's what you're doing with that information as well. And that's really a key of success there too. So some other study tips, because regardless of the source that you're using, it's really about how you're studying it and what you're doing about it. So this is really going to make a big difference on how much you learn and how well you do on the exam. So first, set clear goals. You want to set the goals for your studying so you stay focused and motivated. So you can start by setting small goals. So if you're in clinic still, or you're working, you can say, I plan on studying an hour each night, but knowing that that's all you can do, maybe that would help you create a timeline for when you can actually take the test. You want to write down your goals and keep them in a place that you can see it to help yourself stay motivated and remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing and why, even though studying gets really tough, why you're taking this time out to study. Next is you want to create a study plan. So this plan will help you stay organized with your time, make sure you cover all of the material that you need to cover. But when you're creating this study plan, I would recommend that you start with the areas that you need to learn the most. A lot of people can agree that patient care might be one of the easier sections. I don't want to call it easy by any means, but easier. If that's how you feel, maybe you should start with the rad bio section or another section that you feel is more challenging. So just make sure you know yourself, your weaker sections, and maybe start with those first. And along with the study plan includes the time frame that you can study each day or each week, whatever it might be, and then make time for other things as well so that you feel refreshed and you're not overwhelmed and burnt out. So you want to break your studying into manageable chunks. And sometimes it might even help you to write down your schedule. I used to write it down in an actual calendar. So I knew at the end of the day after clinical was done, tonight I'm studying physics. And I knew for an hour I was going to focus on this section. And that's actually what I did when I was creating the second edition of the book. And it really helped me stay on a timeline that worked for me. Next one is minimize distractions. So distractions can really disrupt our focus and reduce the effectiveness of our studying. So if you have something going on in the background while you're studying, your focus is not full, it's not fully there. So you might need to reduce those distractions as best you can. So find an environment that is free of distractions, which may be difficult for some people, but try your best to find that space and that give yourself that time. So log off of your phone or social media. Make sure the place that you're studying is quiet. Unless you like music, that's fine as well. Whatever works for you, as long as you're not getting distracted. If you find yourself getting distracted again, that means you need a break. Take a break, move your body, and then get back to it in a little bit of time. You want to use active learning strategies. So some of these can include creating flashcards, summarizing the material, practicing problems, and teaching the material to somebody else. So when I was studying, like I said, I broke down the content specifications, and I really wanted to make sure each bullet point that was on the content specifications, I could reiterate or explain a few different points about that specific section. It wasn't just memorizing one line, it was knowing a little bit more in detail about it. And being able to explain it to somebody else is really key. That means you fully can grasp the concept. So make sure you're taking breaks. That helps you recharge. So you're focused when you are studying during a long session. You can take a break every hour or so, or a few hours, depending on what works best for you. So everybody's a little bit different there. You want to do something that you enjoy in those times that you're taking a break. Moving your body and being active is definitely helpful. And you want to make sure you're getting enough sleep. So not just for the exam, but while you're studying as well. You want to make sure you're aiming for about 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. Try to put the books away a little bit before bed so you can actually unwind and get a restful sleep. And the last is review and practice. So you really just want repetition. Repetition is so key here, and it will really help long-term retention. You want to review the notes that you have, and you want to study your material regularly and practice applying if you can. So one last thing is with reviewing. A lot of times there are a lot of things that we need to memorize in a specific section. For example, TD 5.5, it's a pretty big section. You don't need to memorize it all in one sitting. I would break it down into chunks, maybe memorize the first 5 or 8 that you can, and then the next day do the next 5 to 8, whatever seems attainable for you. If you try to do it all at once, it's really hard to remember. And I am very visual, so writing things down, putting them in a specific order really helps me. But again, everyone's different. So just make sure you're setting clear goals, creating a study plan, minimizing any distractions, using these active learning strategies, taking breaks and getting sleep, as well as reviewing and practicing the material so that you can achieve your goals, and to make sure you're patient with yourself. Give yourself the time to learn. Sometimes schools can be 1 to 2 years long, and something you learned 1 or 2 years ago, it seems like forever ago when you're cramming all this information in. So give yourself the time to study and master the information so you can answer it in any possible way. So That is all I have. I think I answered most of the questions that were on my Instagram page. If you have any others, I will go through the chat. There is a little bit of a delay, so let me just make sure I get them all. Okay. So for TD55, is it important that we know the dose for the whole organ, 1/3 or 2/3? So on the content specifications, they did say whole organ. So I would focus on the whole organ and just knowing the concept in case they do ask other questions, knowing that the less of the organ that's involved, the more dose it can tolerate. So just knowing that would help, but they do say, I'm going to pull up the content specifications now, that it is just the whole organ. Regarding the calculator, you showed 2 different calculator models. Are those virtual calculators inside the testing app? Yes, those are virtual calculators inside the testing app. So you would actually have to click on the computer screen, like using your mouse. I think you can use the number functions instead of clicking on the actual numbers, but like to use everything else, you would have to actually click on the computer using your mouse to use the calculator. I believe they still give you the, it's not scientific, it's the other calculator to just have something as well, but the scientific one is only digital on the app itself. And yes, okay. So just as a quick way to wrap it up, this is the content specifications I was referencing. So they break down everything here for you. And then as far as TD55, let me just search it. TD, here we go. So whole organ TD55, it says right there. If you score 75 on the exam, I think the video just ended. So if you score 75 on the exam, but they send you a score in the mail and it's less, does it go off? Okay. So that would be off of the actual score in the mail. But I think the video ended, so I'm going to stop this recording, answer some questions in the Facebook group, and this should be available for you in the Facebook group. Thank you, everyone.